Martina Navratilova urges bigger courts as Eala becomes tennis top crowd magnet. What unfolded at Melbourne Park during Eala's Australian Open debut was not just a scheduling miscalculation. It was a loud, unmistakable signal that women's tennis has a new box office force, and that tournament organizers may already be playing catch-up. A's first round match at the Australian Open was placed on Court 6, one of the venue's smaller show courts. Hours before the match, long lines of fans, many draped in Philippine flags, wrapped around walkways and spilled into adjacent areas as capacity filled. Security eventually advised late arrivals to stop lining up. Hundreds never made it inside. Videos of the jammed entrances and restless crowds quickly went viral, reinforcing a reality that has followed her across continents. Wherever she plays, Filipinos follow. Few voices in tennis carry more authority on such matters than Martina Navratilova. And the 18-time Grand Slam champion did not mince words when asked about the scenes. While praising the fans' discipline and enthusiasm, she pointed to the root of the issue, anticipation, or the lack of it. Well, Lindsay was trying to get there. It's amazing that people were so nicely standing in line, but they would be there for at least an hour if they ever got to the match. So, kudos to the fans. The players have no idea this is happening, Navratilova said during a Tennis Channel discussion. Her most pointed observation, however, was directed squarely at organizers. I think the organizers need to keep more in mind where the players are from and what the actual fan base is here, because there's massive Filipino audience here in Melbourne and Australia. So, keep that in mind next time you make the schedule. She added, the Melbourne episode was not an isolated case. Over the past year, Eala has quietly emerged as the biggest crowd drawer in women's tennis, driven by one of the most passionate and mobile fan bases in global sport at Hong Kong. Local tournament officials reported queues stretching well beyond venue entrances whenever Eala was scheduled to play, with tickets selling out early and walk-up fans turned away. Similar scenes played out in Macau, where Filipino supporters arrived hours in advance, filling stands and creating atmospheres more reminiscent of national team events than regular tour matches. Even fellow players have taken notice. Earlier this January, Croatian standout Donna Vic openly remarked on the consistency of Eala's support, noting that Filipino fans continue cheering regardless of score lines or opponents. Half-joking, Vic suggested Filipinos should adopt her as well. A light-hearted nod to the visibility and warmth of Eala's following, even toward those sharing the court with her in Melbourne. That energy was palpable from the opening game. Eala surged to a stunning first set against Alicia Parks, fueled by roars that echoed well beyond Court 6. While the American eventually asserted her power to close out the match, the result felt secondary to the spectacle around it. Eala stayed on court long after the handshake, signing autographs and acknowledging fans who had waited hours just to catch a glimpse. In an era when tournaments compete fiercely for attention, Eala represents something increasingly rare: organic star power. She does not need a primetime slot to draw interest. The interest follows her. Navratilova's comments captured what many observers have already concluded, that court assignments and scheduling models must evolve alongside the sport's changing demographics. Eala may still be early in her Grand Slam journey, but in terms of live draw, few players in tennis can match her right now. The crowds in Melbourne, Hong Kong, and Macau have already delivered their verdict. The question left hanging after the Australian Open is whether organizers will listen and finally give the sport's most magnetic attraction the stage her fans are clearly demanding. Martina Navratilova urges bigger courts as Eala becomes tennis top crowd magnet. Tennis has always been a game of lines, baselines and sidelines, winners and errors, past and future. Yet every so often a player comes along who makes the lines feel too small, who stretches the imagination of what the sport can contain. In the hush before a serve and the roar after a rally, the court itself begins to feel inadequate. Martina Navratilova knows this feeling. She felt it in the 1970s when she rewrote what athleticism meant in women's tennis. She felt it when power met grace, when the net became a place of ambition rather than fear. And now, decades later, she feels it again as she watches a new kind of phenomenon take shape in the stands rather than solely between the lines. With a wry smile and unmistakable conviction, Navratilova has joked half-seriously that tennis may soon need bigger courts. Not for the players, but for the people who come to watch one in particular, Alex. At first glance, Eala does not look like a revolution. She does not carry herself with the thunder of inevitability that once followed Serena Williams. Nor does she announce her presence with brute force. Instead, she arrives with something subtler and in its own way more disruptive connection. Wherever she plays, crowds grow denser, louder, more emotionally invested. People lean forward. Phones rise into the air. Flags appear where none existed before. Tennis, long accused of being distant, and Martina Navratilova calls for bigger courts as Eala shines as tennis' ultimate crowd magnet. Tennis has always been a game of lines, baselines, sidelines, service boxes, and the thin margins between victory and defeat. But lately, one of the sport's most iconic voices, Martina Navratilova, has suggested that tennis might be outgrowing its traditional boundaries. Not just tactically or commercially, but physically. Her call for bigger courts isn't merely about space, it's about evolution. And standing at the center of this conversation, rallying fans and drawing energy like a live wire, is Eala, a rising star whose presence seems to stretch the court without moving a single line. When legends speak, tennis listens. Martina Navratilova has earned the right to challenge tennis orthodoxy. With a career that redefined athleticism, versatility, and longevity, her opinions carry the weight of history. When she speaks of bigger courts, she isn't critiquing the past, she's anticipating the future. Modern tennis players hit harder, move faster, and cover ground with a level of athleticism that would have seemed superhuman decades ago. Rallies are explosive, angles sharper, and defensive retrieves border on the impossible. Navratilova's suggestion isn't radical for the sake of spectacle. It's an acknowledgement that today's players are expanding the game beyond its original dimensions. Yet, as the sport debates space and scale, it is Eala who proves that tennis isn't only growing horizontally, it's growing emotionally. Eala, more than a rising star. Eala doesn't just enter a court, she transforms it. The crowd leans forward when she plays, as if pulled by gravity. There's a magnetism in her movement, a spark in her competitiveness, and an authenticity that resonates far beyond the baseline.